Welcome to Zine Scene. A zine library is a way for patrons to engage with your collection on a personal, artistically expressive level. Zines open up conversations and create engaged library patrons. In this presentation, you will be introduced to zines and their many uses in your library. Presenter Bryce Martin. Bryce Martin is a library assistant and makerspace instructor at the Anderson County Library. He went to college for art in New Jersey before moving down to South Carolina, where he currently lives with his partner and their cat. He has been making zines since high school and has no interest in stopping anytime soon. So take it away, Bryce.
Thanks, Lisa. Thanks for having me. So today we're going to be talking about zines. All right, I'm going to share my screen so that we all can look at the presentation. All right, can everybody see that? All right, so zine scene. All right, thank you all for being here. My name is Bryce Martin. As Lisa said, please save any questions in the end or until the end or put them in the chat. If you have a piece of paper and a pair of scissors and a pencil on your desk, if you could grab those and put those to the side. We're going to be using those for an interactive portion of the class. Just grab those real quick. I'll give you a couple seconds before we go into the presentation proper. All right. And here we go. All right, Zine Scene with me. I'm Bryce. A zine is a small press publication with the goal of sharing its contents without the use of any corporate distribution system. Fanzines, chapbooks, mini comics, pamphlets are all can be considered zines. The definition is kind of broad. Whenever I talk about zines with people, the first question, like they generally will wait until I've given my spiel, and then at the end they'll very politely ask, what is a zine? And this is what a zine is. This is just the most succinct way to put it. It's hard to put a definition on something like this just because it's a constantly evolving art form and there's no system in place to give it a solid definition, which is just in the nature of it as a medium. All right. Zines have historically been a means of sharing information within fandoms or countercultural movements. Early uses in America mainly involve science fiction or fanzines for bands. Kirk's box zines helped keep the Star Trek fandom alive early on. This is an interesting point for both sci-fi fans and Star Trek fans, as Star Trek was a dwindling fandom, except for with this group of female fans that were writing all this fan fiction. They were publishing it in these zines, dozens and dozens of zines. Star Trek had this giant community, and you'd mail them around, and you would like go to conventions and buy the new like fan fiction. There was no website for these things to share, so you would just buy these little pamphlets and read the stories. Bands like the Beatles, like if you didn't, there was no like Instagram, so you wouldn't be able to see the new photo of Paul McCartney. You would have to wait for the new issue of the Beatles fanzine to come out, and that's how you'd see the new picture of Paul McCartney. Like, what's his new haircut look like? You don't know. You'd have to wait for the zine to come out, and that's how people would communicate within these cultures and fandoms and movements. They would publish these zines, and it gave them a sense of ownership and not with purpose as well, but it legitimized it. It made it shareable. While fanzines are generally, they were the most dominant and still kind of are, there are tons of people who fill their zines with drawings or poetry. Every month in our zine scene here at the library, we highlight a different art style or zine maker or different method or different way to approach zines. Things like collage, mail art, making an instructional zine, or even different formattings, because a zine, we haven't seen one yet. And any printed material you make on your own can be a zine. So the physical object itself is also an aspect that we talk about sometimes at our zine scene here at the library. Here's a pile of Star Trek zines. So these are all hand-drawn covers by like nerdy fans who would publish these things, and they'd go and show their nerdy friends these, and they're really well made. These are all just Xeroxed copies. These are some current zines that are running. Bubbles is a fanzine about alternative comics and manga. King Cat is a zine that's been running since the early 90s by John Porcellino, and it's just journal comics and poetry and his playlist. He'll write down the songs in his playlist. He's been doing that for over 30 years. Many graphic novelists started out in the world of zines. Raina Telgemeier, who's done books like Smile and Drama, incredibly popular and really clever and just great author, started out making these zines and mini comics, and would just go to conventions and give them to people that she admired, people that she looked up to, or she would end up tabling at these conventions and selling. I think Smile also, the whole book ran as zines before it ended up being picked up by Scholastic. The middle one is by Zach. Oh my goodness, I forgot his name. He just had a book out. I know his first name is Zach, but I always forget his last name. He just had a book out called The Fourth Quarter, which is about a middle school basketball team. But he started in these zines that look very similar to how he draws his comics now. And then on the right is a zine comic by Rebecca Sugar, who ended up creating Steven Universe and working on Adventure Time, but she started out making zines. And that's how she was able to get her work out there and legitimize herself in the eyes of an artistic community. All right, so here's an interactive portion. If you would all please grab that piece of paper. And we're going to do a quick folding exercise. If you could take the paper and fold it hamburger style, which is taking it, folding it like this. If we could all fold it like that. Okay, we all have that. Now we're going to take it and then fold it again. So it's really long, like that. All right, so now we have it like this. So unfold that last fold that we just did, and we're going to fold that fold in the opposite direction. So we're going to take that. So that last fold should fold both ways. Now let's unfold the whole thing. Then we're going to fold it hot dog style, which is long ways. So if we could all do that fold real quick. All right. And we're going to undo that fold just to make the paper flat. And then that first hamburger fold that we did, we're going to refold it at that point. All right. And then grab those scissors. We're going to take those and we're going to cut along this middle fold until we hit this fold. And we're cutting at the side that's folded. So we're going to be cutting on this side to this fold. All right, we all have that cut. And we're going to unfold that again. And then we're doing that hot dog fold again. So we have this flap, and now there's this mouth in the middle. We're going to push that together. And then we're just going to this part is a little more harder to explain, but you just take it and you just start folding it, pressing it until you get a booklet shaped object. And there you have a zine. So this has 6 interior pages and 2 cover pages. And this can be done with any size piece of paper, but if you do it with just a normal 8.5 by 11 piece of printer paper, after you fill it up with whatever you want to draw, or whatever you want to write, or whatever you want to collage or make in here, you can unfold it. And you just have a piece of printer paper with all your, whatever you wanted to put in there. And then you can make a copy of this. And you can make an edition, and you can make hundreds of copies. A lot of zine makers make zines like this. This is just a very popular, very efficient way to make a lot of copies of your zine. But this isn't the only way to make zines. Zines come in many shapes and forms. They can be small, like the one we just made. They can be big. They can be 8.5 by 11. They can be 2 feet by 5 feet. They can be smaller than the one we just made. They can be teeny tiny. It's just a booklet that you make to share your ideas. It's a way to give you ownership of your ideas, legitimize your ideas, make them shareable, because while you can say all these things to people, it's sometimes nice to, if we just told stories to each other, there wouldn't be books. So this is just like that. It's just a way to share ideas with people that you might not meet in person. There are stores that sell zines. There are zine fairs. There are art fairs. There are tons of different places you can take these zines. But this is always a great place to start at the beginning of every zine class, every zine scene here at the Anderson County Library. We start with one of these. And even if you don't fill it, even if this is just how you're planning something out, it's just nice to have. Thank you for participating with that. So at your library, a zine library is best located near a makerspace or a teen area. So a zine library can be, ours isn't like a full shelf. It's not like it's smaller than our local author collection. It's just basically a cabinet that's organized and it has tools in there as well. And for these sized zines, we use those old card catalog drawers, and that's how we have our zine library. It can be that small, or if it's big, it's just however many you have. It's sometimes slow going. Building the collection takes some time. Purchasing zines is difficult just because you have to order them from certain people or from stores. They're not easy to find, and it's best to get them in person. So sometimes it's difficult to accumulate a good library. But if you accumulate them through programs, you'll build a little bit faster at your library. And our zine, at our zine scene, every time somebody completes their zine during a class, I ask that they donate a copy. They don't have to. They can keep all the copies for themselves and be greedy, but we do request that they donate one here, and it gets put in a little sleeve. It gets cataloged, the label maker, and it's kept in a drawer so that when people come to the library and ask, what's a zine? We can open up that drawer, pull it out, and sometimes a patron's zine is shown as an example. And cataloging, you can use something as simple as an Excel spreadsheet. You don't have to go through all the cataloging, and because I know that can be really frustrating. So something as simple as an Excel spreadsheet that's accessible to your teen librarians or your makerspace staff or your children's librarian staff, something as simple as that would also work. I know most of us are on Outlook, so most of us have the Microsoft suite. We keep ours labeled in plastic sleeves. Just they're recipe card holders, and it's the exact perfect size for these little zines to go in there safely. They're not tight, it's just a little loose, and then we use a label maker to label them. Unfortunately, they're not they can't leave the library. They're a reference collection. They're kept generally in the makerspace. Just because getting replacement copies, while not expensive, would be difficult, because we have to email the artist. They would have to make a copy. They'd have to send it to us, or they'd have to come into the library to make a copy. We don't keep originals of the people's zines. That's for them to make and them to keep, but we do like to keep copies. A regular zine club or program will help promote your zine library and engage patrons with the collection. Just regularly talking about zines and having programs and having people talk about them, or train of thought. Just keeping them in people's minds, keeping them interacting with them. The more that people interact with information, the more likely they are to hold on to it, in my opinion. So if they make a zine or they hold a zine, they're more likely to understand what it is, versus you saying, oh, it's like a small press publication that one person can make, but it can be made by a group. And it's really small, but it's like a book, but smaller. It's like a small part of a book. It's hard to describe because it's a fluid definition. But if you have a physical thing and say this is a type of zine, or this is what a zine can be, that really helps people understand it. And starting a zine program is relatively simple and inexpensive at your library. Paper, scissors, drawing, writing materials. For the first zine scene that we had here, I had a box of colored pencils, box of black pencils, some pencil sharpeners, paper, and scissors. And people had a great time and they really enjoyed it. And I still have the zines, and those zines that people made that day. I have copies in our zine library. And then as we started getting a little bit more popular and I started understanding what people wanted more, we moved on to collage zines, glue sticks and old magazines. Collaging is the most popular zine scene program. People love that. They get to chop up a bunch of old National Geographics and Vogues and make these wonderful art objects that they get to make copies of here. It's a great way to get people to interact with the collection, not just come to the library and do a craft program, but they're also participating in the library as a whole and participating with art and literature in a way that is difficult to do outside of an academic system. So library being able to offer that is pretty great, in my opinion. And that I'm biased though, because I offer it. Zines are also a great promotional material for libraries to use to promote specific creative programs or events, or even just the library. Like I said earlier, you're interacting with information. When you read a book, you're more likely to retain that than you are if you're just like, look at a billboard or you're handed a pamphlet in school or something like that. Pamphlet goes in the trash, you're driving past the billboard, you don't have time to look at it. But if you're interacting with information and the information is physical, you're more likely to retain it. So if a library is using a zine to promote programs or just the library itself, their digital collections, excuse me, their digital collections, whatever new, what their genealogy collections, whatever, what have you at your library. This is a great way to do it because it's basically you're giving them a book about the library or about this specific thing. And you can even have them not pre-folded. Because if you're there with them and you're at an event, say you're at an art fair and the library has a table at an art fair, you can have them just laid out flat. And then as people come up, you can really quickly, because it takes about 45 seconds, 45 seconds to get them to fold it and snip it with scissors real quick. And they made the book. It's theirs, it's their copy that they made. And that's kind of special. It's a unique object. And that way it's different than a pamphlet. Because if you were to have them fold a pamphlet, they get mad at you for doing free work. But if they're doing a zine, it's different. One that I'm working on for our summer reading program is going to have library information on the 6 interior pages and the 2 cover pages. But then on the other side, because this only uses one side of the piece of printer paper, on the other side, you're going to have a coloring sheet. So you would have coloring sheet, and then you'd have the parent fold it. Then the parent would have a book. And then on the other side, there'd be a coloring sheet. So it's a double use. That's probably we're going to be printing it pretty large, 11 by 17, I think is the goal, just so that they would have a bit of a larger booklet. And then I did go through that more quickly than I would have thought. But yeah, I would like to open up for questions now, because I know every library's need, every person's need is different. And I know I couldn't address all that in the presentation, so I'd like to have ample time for questions. Any questions that you have about zines, about me, about the library, anything like that. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. And please type your questions in the chat.
I can go ahead and start asking. The program that you have at your library, how long has that been running?
So we've been doing the zine scene since, I want to say June or July of last summer. When I got hired on, part of me getting hired on in the interview, I had to pitch programs. Like, what would you do in this job? And I pitched the zine scene as one of my programs. I pitched 3 programs, and that was the one that got caught on, because it's pretty strong, I think, as an idea. And then I did that a couple months after I got hired. I did the first zine scene because we already had the materials for it. I didn't have to order anything. It was pretty easy to get that set up. So I just set that up in the calendar and got some marketing materials together myself and had that out. So that's been going on since last June.
And what age group do you find it to be most popular?
So the age group thing fluctuates because we've had our makerspace is a 12 and up space just because of safety reasons with the equipment we have. We have large heat presses, tons of little sharp things as well. And it's a full concrete floor, so we don't want children running and sliding on the concrete floor with their faces, so we don't have people running around in here. So we're a 12 and up space. Zine scene is generally popular with ages like 14 to about 30. It's a pretty wide spread of people for that. We're aiming to try to get more college people in, but generally it's like ages 14 to about 30 for the zine scene. We're near a local college, so we're trying to get some people from the college do come. But because they're so busy with college, it's hard to get them in here on a weeknight. So we're trying to see if we could switch times, because also we have it at the same time at the same day of the week every month. So we only get one group of people in pretty much. So we might end up switching dates around to see if we can get a new group of people or doubling up a month.
Would you ever go on site to places like a Comic-Con or like a college event, like outreach, basically?
Yeah. Zines would work really well for that as an outreach thing, because of the amount of materials that you would need to bring to do any sort of program. There would be like 1 milk crate's worth of stuff. Like it would be a pretty simple program to bring around. I would do that. Yes, I think that is a good idea. I have not had a chance to do that yet, though.
How long would you say these programs take?
Like when they're running, like during that evening that we have them.
Yeah.
We do an hour. It can be shorter. It just depends, because the way that the zine scene kind of works is it begins with me doing a little PowerPoint, similar to what I just did now, a relatively short PowerPoint presentation. And then we go into an activity portion. So I try to keep that down to like a 10-minute at most presentation. And then sometimes we just launch right into, like during collage, that presentation was pretty involved, because I wanted to really talk about what collage means, and that it's not just stealing other people's photographs and moving them around. Like there's value to it. But then for ones that are like watercolor zines, we did that 1 month, and that's just like, we have materials and we just have to play. We just have to figure this out, how this watercolor paper works. So it depends. Generally it's an hour, but the way that hour is structured shifts depending on what we're highlighting.
So can people actually have a finished product at the end of an hour?
Yeah, some people do. It's pretty rare that they do, but sometimes it does happen where at the end of the hour, they're like, okay, I'm ready to like make copies, and they'll make an edition of 10, and then I'll put that in the zine library. But more often what it is they'll have like the covers done and like a page, so they have an idea of how it works, and they'll take it home and they'll come in a week or two later with a finished thing. We'll make copies.
Do you ever, because you mentioned it's like physical. So would you ever take a scanner and scan and then make it available electronically for others to reproduce from their own printer?
I don't think that's a bad idea. I would just need each, the logistics of that would require me to ask each individual artist if I can do that with their zine, because as of right now, our agreement is that we have a single copy available in the library. I don't think that's a bad idea, just because because it is such a shareable thing that you can print off on any kind of printer. I don't think that's a bad idea at all.
Do you have a formal artist agreement? Like, is
We
it a
so when
contract?
people submit to the zine library, there's an agreement. And it's like a page, and they basically just sign it and give us a contact information. It serves two purposes. It's gives us the right to show their art. It legitimizes the relationship between the library and the artist. And then also it gives us a contact in case their zine gets like messed up and we need to get a new copy. So it serves those two purposes.
And who actually draws that up, that terminology?
So that was a mix of me, my boss, and our marketing manager. So it was.
So you don't need a lawyer.
Yeah, it wasn't a lawyer. It was.
Okay.
It was just in the library, and it was 3 people. It was us bouncing it around and editing little things, just making sure that we're covering all the bases, and so people understand what they're doing when they're giving their zine to us. It just, and it's not like, it's very not legalese, it's very like, it's like a paragraph, and then the sign here, and here's the contact information if we need to get a new one. It's very much like that.
You gave some really good ideas if you're not willing to go into the cataloging portion, like going into your OPAC, having like the Excel.
Yeah.
What would you suggest for browsability? Like how, other than like, can they do it remotely? Like, how would you do that remotely as opposed to somebody being able to come in to look at the reference collection physically?
So for browsability, because it's not an OPAC, it's a little bit difficult. What you would basically have to do is have a shareable link to the Excel that's only viewable. And you'd have that in the web, like if you have your website and you have your like collections tab, and then you go down like genealogy collections, local collections, and you have the zines all the way at the bottom because it's a Z. You just have like a link to the Excel sheet that's just viewable. It sounds very robust, but that would be the best way to do that. Just also because a zine because it's incredibly hard to catalog a zine. So this is just the easiest way to make it searchable by like artist. The way that we have it is title of zine, artist, medium, edition size. So it's the searchability isn't very like, you would have to either know the name, the title, or what medium you're looking for. There's not a lot of tags on that.
Is that on your website?
It's not on the website right now, because I don't think we have a zine library tab.
Okay. It must be really gratifying for your patrons to be able to become authors.
Yeah, it's really exciting. When I said in the presentation, like they're interacting with the collection, they're not in a way that's different than just reading it. That's really exciting to me because it, not the barrier for entry of being an author isn't like, it's not ridiculous, but it's a bit high. So this allows them to have their work feel legitimate. I'm not saying this makes their work legitimate. The work is legitimate because they made work, they made art. But this is a way for them to add an extra layer to how they feel about their art, how they feel it legitimizes them. Because it makes them an author, but it makes them an author in a way that's different from being published by a publisher, because they published it. It's very personal. People are looking at a piece of art, not just a book. So it's somewhere between a book and like a painting. So you have that cross section, and people are generally really excited when they come in. Like I've had people like come to the zine scene, have a zine in the library. They don't show up for a couple months, and they do show up, and they just like peek in the zine library, and they're like, "Yep, still there."
I think of like the NaNoWriMo like month of November, and things like that, which is designed to ease people into becoming authors themselves.
Mhm.
And even that kind of daily practice for the month collectively is a hard thing.
Yeah.
But if it were in a zine, it would be so much more approachable.
Yeah, it's because it's really I don't know, their approach. Yeah, they are approachable. They're not intimidating in the least. Like you can make an intimidating zine, but then that requires a lot of work, I would feel. But they're very approachable. You understand what it is when you see it instantly as well. I don't want to say they're easy because that's very subjective, but they're easy. Like it's clear, you can understand it, and it's not as scary as like when I did NaNoWriMo in college and in high school. It's scary, it's big.
Right.
Versus like a zine was it's bite size.
Right.
Yeah.
So our audience are mentioning that they're going to be doing planning maker spaces. So it was a very helpful thing to hear, and that we have someone working with Russian speaking people who most are children and also seniors who love coloring. And so the zine would be very good for for that.
Yeah, absolutely. You can do, because you'd be able to have, even for like kids, you could have like really simple coloring pages on the zine, or you could have like, you could do one that is even like you design a zine for a program where you just do really simple line drawings yourself. The librarian would, and then you would make the zine, and then everybody would get a copy, and then you would just color that in. And you could do like mandala drawings, something as complex as that, or like, I don't know, if you're good at drawing Elmo, you could draw Elmo a few times and like have something like that. They have a lot of uses, and I think coloring is definitely a good one.
As far as libraries go and marketing, that being an ongoing challenge for libraries, if you could share some thoughts about that, that would be great.
Yeah, I touched on it a little in the presentation, but I definitely will go into more detail. I'll approach it from getting people into the zine program, advertising the zine program, and then what zines can be used to advertise, because it's two ends we can approach it. As far as advertising zines, talking to colleges, because I think zines they're not like a young person's game, but the college person would probably be more, would be easier to get in. They would understand it a bit quicker. It'd be more on their path. So talking to colleges, nerds. So if you go to like a game store or a comic store, that's where I advertised our zine scene for the first several months. Was I would put up posters in the local comic store, the local game store, and those people kind of understand what a zine is, even if it's in the periphery. They get what it is, and they'll kind of come to the program. So for zines, a kind of pointed guerrilla marketing campaign where you're going around and you're putting up posters after asking for permission from the businesses, of course. You put those up in their windows and people will see it and hop on board. We do advertise the zine scene in our monthly newsletter, both on paper and in email, and on our social media pages, but those only go to the people that already follow. So you're basically only hitting people that probably would have come anyway, or people that are interested anyway. So for this kind of thing, you just want to kind of guerrilla market it at nerds. Because its foundation is nerds, and the people building and lifting up this medium are nerds, and I count myself among them. I'm not using that in a condescending way. Yeah, getting people into the zine scene is, you want to approach like arts, because it's also the intersection of like fine arty people who like love to do like large paintings and mixed media. It's the intersection of the fine art people and the nerds, and that's where they meet, is at zines. And that's a good common ground, and you can get a good group of people in doing it that way. And then from the other way, using zines as a marketing tool, like I said, if you print a zine that has your library's information and you're able to get people to fold it themselves really quick, and then you're like, that's a program we also do. That folding thing, you can make books just like that. And if you got a nice little zine with the library information, that's a pretty neat thing for them to have, because then they have, instead of just a pamphlet, which I think socially we all understand a pamphlet will get thrown away. We can design the most beautiful pamphlet and have them printed nice in color on colored cardstock. They'll be beautiful. But socially, we know we throw them away. We throw away a pamphlet, but a zine is closer to a book, and we don't throw away books, do we? So if we have this sort of relationship with the object, it'll hopefully make them less likely to throw it away and more likely to flip through it. And if they're just passively flipping through it and they suddenly see, oh, you have Canopy, that's cool, that's like movies, I know the library had that. Or, oh, you have a makerspace with a sewing machine, I do want to learn to sew. Like it's interactive versus a pamphlet. We know how to interact with a pamphlet, which is passively, we throw it away. So this is a more active engagement.
Can you give some sources for like zines that, you had a great slide there where you were talking about some well-known makers of zines? Like, is there a place that people can go to for something like a bibliography?
That's really tough because like all the ones I showed you, I kind of stumbled across them, or like somebody would show off that they had a Raina Telgemeier zine because she made 10 of them. Like the hard part about a bibliography of those things is because they would generally be made by the artist and then like either sold at a convention, like an independent comic expo or something like that, or they'd be given away. And the artist doesn't know how many they made. They don't know where they are. They're just kind of gone with the wind. They just blow away. So it's hard to there are some blogs like Optical Sloth, I think is what it was called. And that's a blog that would review zines, and that goes back to the early 2000s. And if I would name search like, James Kochalka, he does the Johnny Boo comics, the children's comics. And you'd find his old zines, or Dash Shaw, who does graphic novels. His old zines are on there. It's not getting a bibliography of that sort of thing isn't easy because it is not very accessible. Just because the nature of zines, there's not a good cataloging system. There used to be one called the Fact Sheet 5, or even Spit and a Half. Spit and a Half is it's now a store, but it used to be a zine that kind of just cataloged what was going on in the zine in the in the nationwide zine scene, but that's pretty difficult now. It's harder than it was in the 90s or something like that. So that, yeah, I wish I could give like a good, like a database. Yeah, I would just Optical Sloth as a blog that reviews.
Can you tell us about Fact Sheet 5?
Fact Sheet 5 is it was a zine that went out. If you send in your address, you would get this zine, and it would basically be a catalog of zines. But you would rarely actually see the covers. It would just be the title of the zine, the name, and then maybe a sentence about what it was about, and then the contact info for the person. So it was really tight, and then you would mail that person who had that zine, who made that zine. You'd mail them $1, and then they would mail you back a zine. That it sounds very antiquated, but because it was such a fractured community, and this is kind of, I think when the internet picked up, this kind of thing died down. But then when the internet picked up, zines also died down because blogs kind of replaced zines, but then people realized they didn't actually own their blogs, so zines went back up a couple of years ago. So the Fact Sheet 5 type, any zine like that kind of died off with blogs, but it would just go out every month if you were on the list. And you'd have a little ad. There's some people that tried to resurrect that, but it doesn't, because people want to see the cover now. They want to know kind of what it looks like. So that kind of thing isn't as popular anymore.
So your background as an artist, how can you explain a little bit how your interest and how that translated with your art?
So I came into, you might have noticed that I talked a lot about comics in my zine presentation, and comics and zines intersect a lot, but they're not synonymous. They intersect, but they're not the same, because zines can be photography, poetry, whatever, and comics are always comics. So I wanted to be I studied cartooning, and then you find out that all these cartoonists and comic artists make zines. And then you're like, what's a zine? And then you start looking at their zines, and then you look at the people that they like. And you kind of just go down this rabbit hole. So you basically just start at Art Spiegelman, who did Mouse, he published this magazine with a bunch of other artists. Who are these other artists? Oh, this guy has a magazine, but it's not really a magazine, it's a zine. What's that? You end up looking that up. And this all happened in high school at a library. At my local library, I would be in the comic section, and between all the superhero stuff, you'd find like Drew Wang's Set to Sea, which is basically a very long zine. It's just one page comics about this guy who gets kidnapped to be a sailor and wants to write a book. It's very Popeye the Sailor, Moby Dick type story, and it's very good. But you find that and you're like, oh, he does zines? What's a zine? He does mini comics? What's a mini comic? That's kind of like a zine, but he made it himself. And then you start realizing you can do this. You look at these people, and you're like, they did that themselves, just because they felt they needed to. It was a compulsion. They needed to make this thing, and they realized that they couldn't, that there wasn't a system in place. But there was a medium, but not a system. So you have the medium of zines outside of any systematic sharing mechanism or distribution mechanism, I guess. And you end up focusing, and you start making them. And then in high school, I didn't know how to edit anything on a computer, and I was drawing too big, so I would just manually shrink the drawings on the printer, and then shrink them more, and then arrange them on the printer to make an 8-page fold zine. And then I would have to do that, and then and it would take me a whole afternoon to print like 10, because I would have to chop everything down and keep shrinking it. And I'd hog the printer, which isn't a nice thing to do. But yeah, it's basically, my background is just I draw comics, and the best way to get people your comics, if you're not I want to say if you're not normal, if you're not publishable, the best way to get people who like your stuff looking at your stuff is by printing zines. And the way I do it is I have them subscribe, and they pay, $4 a month, and every month they get a zine in the mail. And the ones I print are they're just a little bit bigger than this, but not by much. Oh, I think you're muted.
Sorry, we have somebody asking if you could show one of your zines.
I don't have any of mine here, unfortunately. I brought a stack to show. After questions, I was going to do a show where I show you a stack of zines, none of which are mine.
Isn't that like, oh, look at you. Here you are, like sharing and being so kind, and yet you don't even bring one of your own.
Yeah, I'll tell you what. Okay, I have a couple of zines in the zine library. If you are okay with me leaving my screen for
Yes.
35 seconds, I'll go grab
Yes.
some.
Yes.
Okay, I'll be right back.
Okay, sure. So nice. And we have the beautiful backdrop to look at, and the trees moving in the background.
So here are two that I have in our zine library. These are a bit older, so I don't really make things exactly like this. This is also a chance for me to show you, this is how we catalog our zines. So it's a plastic sleeve, and then it just has like a label at the top, and it says Martin Bryce, digitally scanned and compiled, which would be like the medium. And then this is number 4 out of 20 copies. Then pull it out. And this one is, this doesn't have any of my drawings in it. This is me scanning in a bunch of 1980s Japanese robot instruction manuals and compiling them. And this one is cool because it has a belly band, which is just this. It goes around the zine. And then it opens up, and you have like
Oh,
this is me
wow.
compiling some, I guess this counts as ephemera. This isn't really me making any art. It's just sort of me showing how cool these old robot toys would look.
Yeah.
So this is one that I made. I was testing out like different kinds of paper, and I had these a pile of these manuals, and I ended up scanning them, and then I thought it would look good with a belly band. So the belly band is a good way to give it. The belly band is a good way to give it a cover without wasting it, because you only got 8 pages on this. So if you have a belly band, that's the cover. So you have 8 pages of guts that you can use instead of wasting one on a cover.
Oh, okay.
And this one is drawings, but these were They were notebook drawings. This one's called Boot Surgery. And this one was about me. I was taking pictures down the train tracks, and I was just drawing and writing kind of what I saw. And then I realized that the inside of my boot was decaying. So I had to like chop out part of my boot. Yeah, so this is like a drawing of the train tracks. Yeah, and this one I only made 3 of these, and I think I threw away the original drawings for it because I tried to color them in a marker and they didn't turn out right, and I threw them away. So there's only 3 copies of this one, and then this one, there are 20 copies. I think this one's in a store somewhere. I think in London. They said it was cool and they asked for copies, so they have a couple copies there.
How did you get that out to London?
I had one book come out with a real publisher. It's like a couple people who are smarter at marketing than me and can pay for printing my book. They printed a book for me and ended up in this store in London. And then I was on vacation there with my family because we had bought tickets before COVID. Then COVID happened, so we had to wait like 3 years before we could actually go. And I went to the comic book store to see if my book was there because I was feeling very vain. And I walked in and I was going to sign them. And the guy at the counter was like, "Are you Bryce?" I was like, "Yeah." And he was like, "Okay, your comic is cool. When you go back to I know you're not from here. Why are you here?" I was like, "I'm vacationing." He's like, "Okay, when you go back to the States, email me. And we'll take 5 copies of whatever you have right now."
Right.
And I had a couple of drawing zines, a comic, and then that. And I was like, "Do you want this? It's not really comics. It's just like a scanned compiled thing, and it looks like this." And I sent him a PDF of it. And he was like, "Yeah, that's cool. I'll take it." And I sent them 5 copies.
Cool. Yeah, I'm just seeing that there's comments that you're really needed to figure out how to place pictures. Organizing and yeah. I was going to also mention that this kind of thing that you're talking about, like you can see how it can bleed into other stuff, very, very well. And I think a lot of libraries have gallery spaces too. So even having it as an art event could be something that it could get more exposure.
Yeah, absolutely. We're currently working with our local arts council to get our maker space as like a I forget what the term is, but it's like a gallery outside of their gallery so they can use this as a space. But I think zines do lend themselves to being like, because it is like the intersection of fine art and like nerdiness. So if you have like a bunch of like fine arty zines, it makes it accessible. It adds a level of accessibility to fine art. So if you have a bunch of like people from your local like arts center or arts council, like make zines or like compile their paintings into zines, you could have that would be like their book, their little art book, and that would be a cool way to kind of have an event around them.
And it's not, Toshin as publisher that costs like tons of money.
Yeah, you don't have this giant 2-foot hardcover. You have this thing that like fits in your pocket. And when I make zines, this is like an actual rule, but I'm like, the best zines should fit in the back of your sketchbook because they should you should be able to carry them around, and they should be, because everything you look at influences what you make. So if you have it in the back of your sketchbook, it's like next to what you make. So the ideas should bleed into each other, it's like sleeping with your favorite book under your pillow. Like it's hokum, but it's funny to me.
Well, this has just been so delightful. I'm so glad that you shared your time with us and your expertise.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's been a blast.
Yeah, and what a delight. You had that pile of zines too there.
Yeah,
And so nice.
would you like to see a couple of really cool formatted ones? I know we only have a couple minutes.
Sure.
So I'll highlight a couple. So this is one by Drew Wang, who did that Set to Sea book. He also publishes a children's comic called Margot Magoo. That's quite good. But he did this comic Blar, which is about a barbarian. And he published it as a zine, and it has this die cut cover of like his sword. It's like, and it's just like this guy who's really strong in oafish, and he's like fighting like these. So it's stuff like this, and this was really exciting when I found it, because I was like, he made a zine, because his book was
wordless?
really moving. Was that?
Is it wordless?
It is wordless. I think the only word in it is blar, which is what he yells when he fights. And then let's see. Here's one. This is one that I picked up in London at that store. And this one is just it's A4 paper, which is close to 8.5 by 11. It's not quite. And this one has this one's bound with thread, and it's just folded in half. And it's just drawings, and then folded and bound with thread. And you can, binding it with thread, it sounds like, oh, that would be so difficult. But it literally, this would probably take 3 minutes. You have your awl or a thick needle, you stab it through, run the thread through. And it's just a way to make it. And he has it because he's fancy. He has it like hanging off a little bit. And this is just a waxed thread. You can use an embroidery thread for the same thing, but waxed thread is nice. And then let's see. Oh, this is one a friend of mine did, Guy Pradel in France. And he drew just these places that he would make up. So it's just like buildings and things.
That's amazing.
And then in the back, he put in a map so you could see where all the places are. And this is just paper folded in half, stapled. And the only thing he had to do was print this out extra and glue it in the back.
Wow.
And you're looking at this, and you're like, that's beautiful. And you're like, I could do that. Like, you understand the cool thing about zines, like a book is like, that was like in a machine, and it was bound with thread, and it's like the registrations were glued together, and it's this giant press. But with a zine, you're looking at it and you're like, I know exactly how that was made. And if I gave myself the grace to make mistakes and the time to make this thing, I could replicate that with my ideas.
We have a question about how many pages can be in a zine.
There's no limit. The one that we made with the folding paper, that gives you 6 interior, 2 exterior, but there's really no limit to how many pages can be in a zine. The line between book and zine is pretty flimsy, because while books have a semi-solid definition, zines do not, and they can bleed into books. So you can have a zine that's like 80 pages. But I would say, like, once you're perfect binding something, which is like the glue bind that you have even on like on a picture book or like a National Geographic, where you have like that perfect bind, which is just glue. The line between, like, that could be a book, it could be a zine. The line between book and zine is for you to kind of distinguish, or as for the artist to distinguish. So sorry, I didn't really give you an actual answer. Sorry, Nellie. I see your question. I'm just trying to, there's no real answer to that. A zine ends and then a book begins, but you get to choose where that is. Oh, you're welcome.
Sorry, we're just right up on time, and I just appreciate you very much, especially taking your time on a Friday afternoon after a long week, I'm sure. So.
Oh, of course. Thank you for having me. This has been a blast, and I've been looking forward to this for a while. And I've written and rewritten that presentation several times because I wanted it to be like not too dreary. So I'm glad that everybody had a good time.
It was fantastic. It was fantastic. And we hope to see you again, because I feel like many people will love to hear this and be inspired.
Absolutely. Yeah, I want to tell as many people about this as possible. I appreciate everybody that came. I appreciate you for having me. I think the more people that make zines or participate in literature, the more voices we have in these things, the more enriching our lives can be as we're exposed to more people's lives. So I think this is a nice thing for people to share and understand. So thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for attending, and have a great day.
Have a nice day. Bye.